If I walk in the pathway of duty, if I work to the close of the day, I shall see the great King in his beauty. When I've gone the last mile of the way, when I've gone the last mile of the way, I'll rest. I said I'll rest. I'm gonna rest. I'll rest at the close of the day. And I know there are joys, Lord, waiting for me when I've gone the last mile of the way.
And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and served the Baals. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They went after other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were around them, and bowed down to them. And they provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord, and served the Baals and the Ashtoreth. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers, who plundered them. And he sold them into the hand of their surrounding enemies, so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, as the Lord had warned, and as the Lord had sworn to them. And they were in terrible distress.
Here we go with one of those recurring themes. Last week at the end of the show, I promised you, if you tuned in this week, that I'd probably be able to restore the fear of God to your life that you may be missing. I know sometimes in my life, I lose this awe of God's power. I lose the awe of His being, to the point where I forget that He's watching every action that I commit, and every thought that passes through my mind is registered easily before Him, and that there's a day of judgment to be considered, and a heaven to be won, and a hell to be shunned. I forget those things because I'm altogether worldly. Perhaps that's your testimony, that you're a professing Christian, but you're worldly. That's a very dangerous position. As we saw in the beginning of the second chapter of Judges, God said, worldliness will bring a snare. It's been a snare in my life. Sometimes I've wanted to make money so badly that I've done things that are dangerous to do, that are walking on a razor's edge between right and wrong. It's dangerous, and every time I've come to that, God has made me suffer for it. I'm glad He does, because He chastens those He loves. Remember from Hebrews 12, He chastens those He loves. If He doesn't chasten you, He doesn't love you. It's that simple. You chasten the child to keep him from further danger. God does operate that way. You can read it in Hebrews 12 yourself. It's not my idea. And I'm grateful. But while I'm suffering, I don't like it. And here we have another example where these people have done what I've often done and what you've probably done to God. They've lost their fear of Him after a period of good news where they don't suffer for a while. They have this idea that they can do what they want, and they do this. Verse 11, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. The Baals were a group of Canaanite gods, sticks and stones, really ridiculous. And the people who surrounded the Canaanite tribes worshiped sticks and stones. They offered prayers to sticks and stones. They offered songs of praise to sticks and stones. They asked for help from sticks and stones. They asked for health from sticks and stones. And they attributed all of their good health, their good wealth, and success in this world to sticks and stones. And all the time, the real God, the eternal God, was listening and being provoked. Now, the Israelites lived with these people, and pretty soon, the Israelites came up with this idea. Let's attribute our success, our good crop, our good wheat crop, to God. That makes sense. But at the same time, let's cover our bases and attribute success also to my wife's God, who is one of the Baal's gods. In other words, let's give an offering to the Lord Jehovah, and let's give an offering to Baal. And if Baal doesn't exist, it won't be a problem, because we also gave an offering to the real God. The problem is they forgot that the real God gets angry when you give any offering to another god. Look at this now. It says there, and you'll see it here, verse 13, they forsook the Lord and served the Baal and the Ashtoreths. So we not only have male gods that don't exist, we have female gods who don't exist. We have it today, where I'll hear people talking about some sort of a being that's a fiction of somebody's imagination, and some of the times today they become she-gods. It doesn't matter, they're all false gods. There's only one true God, and that one true God gets provoked when somebody comes up with this idea of asking a fictional God for some sort of help, or attributing their success or health or breath or wealth to some fictional God. It irritates the real God. So, you don't think so? Remember what it said at the end of verse 12. They provoked the Lord to anger. They forsook him. Verse 14, and the anger of the Lord was hot. Now, here you have a God who creates thousands of worlds, governs them all most easily, hangs the stars in the skies, and he's angry with you and me. Why? For trifling with these make-believe gods. You say, well, Bill, I don't really do that today. Oh, you don't? Well, I do sometimes. And here's the way I do it. I'm altogether worldly. Remember what I said at the beginning. I get too engrossed in the things that are in this world, whether it's money or whether it's success or any other thing that isn't going to cross over to eternity with me. Is really not very important. You won't miss anything in eternity that stayed this side of death, and neither will I. We have to be very careful to make sure our hearts and our minds are on the eternal God, the existent God. And when we ask for favors, we need to ask him. And when we give praise for the favors that have come to us, we need to give the praise to the one who authored that favor. That's reasonable, isn't it? John's here with me tonight. If my son came into the room right now and said, I just want to thank John for helping me with the debt I owed and blah, blah. And I said to him, son, I'm the one that gave you the money, not John. And he said, well, I know, but I like John. I just want to thank John for doing. Well, you'd think he was insane, but God thinks you're insane. When God gives you something in this world, and remember, if you ask him in prayer for something and he answers it, certainly you recognize that he gave it to you. It doesn't matter. Whatever abilities you have, even if you're the worst atheist that ever lived, the most convinced atheist that ever lived, I'm saying to you, God gave you the wealth to buy the sofa you're sitting on right now while you're mocking me in this show. He bought the car for you that you're driving down the road while you're cursing him. There's no escaping it. And one day, one of us will prove to be right and one will prove to be wrong. In this case, I think I'm going to prove to be right. Now, God's angry with them. And what does he do? This is what's scary about really reading the Bible instead of somebody telling you how God ought to be. He delivered them into the hands of plunderers who despoiled them. Now, that's not the part your pastor tells you if your pastor's one of those Dallas-bred, I can't remember that guy's name, from Gallus, you'll know who I mean. Does he ever preach on this subject? I don't think so. And you'll see why. God is angry with his own people, his beloved people, his chosen people. And it's like being angry with his church today. And what does he do with them? He turns them over to plunderers. Remember what I told you about providence. He governs his world where even wicked people. Does God hate the Canaanites? Yes. Is he going to destroy the Canaanites? Yes. Did he insist that the Canaanites be destroyed by the Israelites? Yes. And yet right now, God is going to allow these ungodly, false-worshiping people to plunder his own people. Wow. That's the first time I ever read this, I just stopped right here because I had to consider my life, and I thought, has God permitted ungodly people to take advantage of me, to bring false charges perhaps even against me, to do these things, to take my money? The answer was yes. I needed to be punished by having my money taken from me, and God in love did just that. Now, I would like to say to you, I learned my lesson. If you know me, you'll know that I had to revisit that lesson and have it done again because I'm so stupid that I won't learn easily. Perhaps you're like me. But I know this, God turned them over in his anger to people who were wicked people who despoiled them. I can't get around it. He sold them into the hands of their enemies all around so they could no longer stand. Now here's what's really scary, verse 15. Wherever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for calamity. Here we have God's people, his church going out, walking through the world, and wherever they went out, God, in his anger, let all the wicked people triumph over his own people. He didn't not just permit it, he strengthened the wicked people to triumph over his own people. Now I'm going to promise you, you don't hear much of this kind of talk today. How do you apply this to your own life? Well, we're about to do that for you, but I want you to get the full brunt of this. The Lord had said, and the Lord had sworn to them, and they were greatly distressed. I'll bring calamity on you, is what he's sworn to do. And they were greatly distressed. Who is the they? Not the unbelieving, wicked Canaanites, but God's own chosen people, his beloved people, were distressed and distraught and overrun and defeated. Why? God ensured their defeat. That's a frightening prospect. I asked you at the end of the last show, is it possible that you've lost your fear of God's disapproval? Is it possible that you've forgotten that it's a terrible thing to fall into the hands of the angry God? That he will not only punish you at the end of this world, he'll turn your foes against you now in the 21st century and cause you to suffer. Why? He loves you if you're his. Because he intends to raise a child correctly. He's willing for you to have punishment inflicted on you now that you might not lose your life later. It's a scary proposition, but it's one you have to deal with, especially if you deal with the book of Judges. So now we've set the stage. The Israelites have good news in their life. Everything's going prosperously. They always respond to good news by doing wickedly, just like you and I do. So now they've done wickedly. They're serving other gods. They don't have to actively serve these gods the way we think of it. They just permit these gods to coexist with the worship of the true God, and that's enough to provoke the true God. And he brought calamity on them. They suffer. It's the loss of crops, the loss of health, plagues in the land. There's all manner of things that come always in these things. Sometimes military defeats. And now God's saying, I'm ensuring that you're defeated until you come to your senses. And here's verse 16 of Judges chapter 2. Nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them. So I promised you a few weeks ago that you'd see this pattern.